this pole with these ropes, and we would play with it. I later learned, my mom told me when I described it to her, what on earth is this? I've never seen anything like it. And she called it a maypole. And you just kind of grab it and run around in a circle. But we had such a good time, this little girl. And she was dark complected. She had thick hair and was in a perfect braid down her back. Hello, everybody. My name is David Parker. I recently retired as a registered nurse after 42 years. I did labor and delivery, bringing spirit into the world, and I did 17 years of hospice, seeing patients out of the world. I worked 20 years in a trauma unit in the emergency room. I worked 5 years of my hospice. I did pediatric hospice, which was newborns up to age of 17 years old. So I saw a lot of birth and a lot of death in my years as a nurse. But when I was a child, I was about 5 years old, and this would have been in the late 1950s, very early 1960s. I had a lung infection, and I was in the hospital off and on for about a year and a half. And it was at the local children's hospital. And one day out of many, I had a medical emergency, and the doctors had to rush in, the nurses had to rush in and provide life-saving treatment for me. And while they were doing that, I felt myself just get out of bed. I felt great. And I got out of bed and put my feet over the side of the bed, and I just walked away. And ended up, I was walking right through them. I didn't realize, but I was having an out-of-the-body experience. And as I walked down the hallway of the hospital, and it was a very old hospital that had huge ceilings and very wide hallways. And I'm walking down the hallway, and I could see doctors and nurses pushing patients, and they would push them right through me. And I just thought, well, this is kind of fun. What's going on here? And as I go down the hallway, there was this huge, massive ball of people. There must have been maybe 200, 300, 400 of them. And they looked like pen and ink outlines. They were like black ink outlines all around their body, but the inside was kind of an off-white color. So they looked almost cartoonish. They looked like people that didn't have bones because they were swirling in and out and among each other, and their arms would go around somebody else's head, and someone's leg would go over somebody's waist, and they would dip inside the ball, just swirling in and out and in and out and bending totally unnaturally. There's no way a human could actually bend like that. And their legs and their faces, and then as the face would stretch, their mouth would stretch bizarrely wide. They looked miserable, but I didn't feel like, I wasn't afraid of them. I didn't fear them. I wasn't feeling any agony from them. They just kept swirling and swirling and swirling. And it was a perfect ball. I'm going to say that the hallway was probably 25 feet. It took up every bit of the hallway, from the floor to the ceiling, from wall to wall. Hundreds and hundreds of them swirling in and out, feet, legs, faces, shoulders, arms, constant motion. And again, the doctors and the nurses and the patients walking down the hall were walking right through them. They didn't see it at all. They didn't see the ball of people. They didn't see me. And I'm just standing there staring at them. I'm totally transfixed as to what this was. And pretty soon this little girl comes up to me and she says, you want to play? Let's go play. I go, well, yeah, I'm a kid, let's go do that. So we go outside, and there's this little playground, and there's other children there, but she and I stay next to each other. And there was this pole with these ropes, and we would play with it. I later learned, my mom told me when I described it to her, what on earth is this? I've never seen anything like it. And she called it a maypole. And you just kind of grab it and run around in a circle. But we had such a good time, this little girl. And she was dark complected. She had thick hair and was in a perfect braid down her back. And she was wearing like a little checkered pinafore, like from the 1950s, maybe 1940s. And we were playing and laughing and having the best time. And she says, well, you can play a little while longer, but you can't stay here. And I thought, well, why not? I'm having such a good time. And, the sun was out, but it was bright, but it didn't hurt. Other kids laughing and giggling and playing. It was a lovely outside, like a park with all kinds of toys. And the next thing I knew, I'm going backwards, like into my bed and into my body, and there's all these doctors doing stuff to me, and it was very painful. Whatever happened, they saved my life, and things were back to normal. I was in an oxygen tent. Back then, they would put plastic all over the bed and fill the whole bed up with oxygen. Today, they have little nasal prongs just to go in your nose. And we had this one nurse, because I had been to the hospital in and out for a good year at that time. And there's this one nurse that always took care of me and always liked her. And the little girl, I forgot to say, when we were out when we were out playing, just before I came back to the body, she said, "My name's Penny. Tell my mom I love her." And then I went back to the body. So I just instinctively knew that was Penny's mom. So it's like the next day or so, she came in and was taking care of me. And I said, I saw Penny. We were playing. And Penny said to tell you that she loved you. And this nurse just looked at me in horror. It just freaked her out. And she left the room and never came back. And it was later that my mom told me that she quit. She quit right then and there. That in the past, she lost her daughter. Her daughter's name was Penny. And she was skating out on a lake in the ice, and the ice broke, and she fell through and drowned. And it was a long time before they found her body. So I felt bad, but then I felt good that I got to give her that final message that she never got to share with her mom, and tell her that she loved her. I hope she came to terms with it later. I never did see her, but I think of that. It's so clear in my mind. I think of that every day. That was my out of the body travel, near-death experience. But the weird thing about that ball of people, seeing them swirl and swirl and swirl. Now, I was just a child when that happened. And later on, I became a registered nurse, and I was working in hospitals. And as a nurse, working in the hospital, wide awake, taking care of my patients, 6 other times in the 40 years that I was a nurse, I saw that exact same thing, but awake and working as a nurse. 5 times were in hospitals, hospital settings. I worked in an AIDS unit for 3 years. I saw it twice there. I saw it in the hospital, and once in a hospice setting. And in the hospice setting, it was a very small room. It was a break room, and one whole wall of the break room was glass, and it was daylight, and the sun was coming through, and we had a soda machine and sofas, and I'm sitting there with friends and taking a little break and visiting, and all at once here was the ball of people. But again, it filled the room. The room was only about 10 feet tall, so the ball of people, there was a lot less people in it, was 10 feet tall. It went from floor to ceiling and pretty much side to side because it was a wider room. A perfect round ball, people swirling in and out and like this, and their heads coming back and their heads going forward, and legs and backs and shoulders disappearing into the ball, and others swirling around, constantly swirling. And we had family members walk right through it. They didn't see anything. And I said to my friend, "Look, do you see that? Do you see this like ball of people?" And he didn't see it at all. It was just me. So total in my life, I've seen it 7 times. Once in my near-death experience, and then 6 times as a nurse. And every single time that I saw it, it was in a hallway, and it was always in a hospital setting. And I've gone through like old drawings, like back in the 1700s, trying to find something that would look like it. Dante's Inferno, whatever. I have yet to find any depiction of that. I have a friend of mine working on doing a computer-generated image. I have no idea what it was. They looked miserable, but I didn't feel misery from them. And generally, I pick up on that, especially as a nurse. You learn to pick up on what's going on with your patients, because I would have so many patients that couldn't speak. They were paralyzed. They were mute. They were non-responsive, but they were still in there, and you could feel them. And I could feel if they needed turned, or if they needed pain medication, or if there's anything I could do to help them. These ball of people, I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. So I don't know. I sent them love and let them have their experience, whatever that is. That's one of many experiences I've had as a nurse. And as a child, my grandmother saw spirits, my parents saw spirits. I've had so many encounters with spirit. And more than try to explain what I saw or get answers to what I saw, it's the feeling that I get. I get a wonderful feeling every time I'm around a spirit or have any spiritual encounter. I think maybe we don't need the who, what, when, where, why something happens. It's just appreciate when spirit opens up and reveals itself to us. Just appreciate that and just know that you're growing just a little bit more, a little bit higher. The more you appreciate what experiences that you have, I think you'll get more. I think that's how we grow spiritually. After my near-death experience as a child, I never feared death. Never feared it at all after seeing that. It's wonderful. It's wonderful over there. And little Penny, she's probably still there playing, waiting for me to come back. I'll be an old man now, because that was 65 years ago. And I still remember. I remember it so clearly. And my hospice patients have been some of my very best teachers, because we spend our life accumulating and doing this and doing that, and trying to meet other people's needs and try to accomplish and gather. And when it comes down to it, as they get closer and closer to death, none of that's important. And the stuff isn't important. And it finally gets to the point the family's not all that important, because they start focusing in on seeing something that the rest of us don't see. I've seen this thousands of times, where the patients are seeing past loved ones, family members, some spiritual being that I don't necessarily see all the time, but I have been blessed and privileged to get to see it a few times. Several times I got to see at least the outline of the beings that the patients were talking to. And that's what their focus is. People wonder about, is someone going to come back, or, are they going to be upset over, whatever happened in the past? I think as they get close to death and after they die, I don't think any of this stuff means anything to them. It's such an incredible experience for them. And I found that when my 2 boys died. I had 2 beautiful little boys, and they were 7 and 9 years old and playing in the front yard. And somebody drove into the yard, was intoxicated, and ran over my 2 boys, and killed them. I was in the house and I heard all the screaming, and the neighbors were running over, and I, what's going on? And I go out there, and there's this car in my front yard, and all this red, and I'm a nurse, and I just froze. I just froze, and my beautiful, wonderful neighbors came to my rescue, and the car had run over my sons and killed them. And I was lost, absolutely lost. I was a single parent. Their mother had just died 3 months prior to cancer. And so I was just a single dad. And then all at once I was just a dad. And as many spirit encounters as I had throughout my life, I was not prepared for that. And I just froze. I just froze, and I stayed in the house for a whole year. I didn't go outside. I closed the windows. Actually, I painted over the windows because I just didn't want to see the world. I just completely separated myself, and my friends brought food. I never stepped out of the house for a year. And then one day, I'm in the living room, and there's this sparkle in the corner of the room, like sparklers, like diamonds, a few little diamonds, and then a bunch more diamonds, and a bunch more diamonds. And I thought, oh boy, it's an electrical fire. Now what am I going to do? And it got bigger and bigger and bigger. It was like about like this wide, about this tall, oblong, thousands and thousands and thousands of diamonds. And I heard two voices come out of it. And it was like young executives, maybe in their upper 20s. And they were yelling at me. They were saying, you got to stop. You're holding on. We have important work to do here, and you're interfering. And as long as you hold on, we can't get done what we need to do. And this has got to stop right now. You got to straighten up. You got to let go. We got to move on. Bye-bye. And they just told me off. And I'm thinking, well, I'm sorry. And instinctively, I knew it was my two boys. They had died a year earlier at ages 7 and 9. But now they sounded like, 26, 27-year-old, very well-educated executives. And they didn't stop. They kept yelling at me. This is ridiculous. You're holding on. You. It's all about you. We got stuff to do. You have no idea how important the work is over here. It's not all about you. You got to let go. And had they said, oh, Daddy, we miss you, we love you, I would have stayed stuck. I would have, stayed helpless. But they told me off, and they told me that whatever's going on over there is incredibly important. There's work going on over there. There's activities, there's growing, there's maturity, there's wisdom. These were like brilliant, well-educated executives. And finally I said, yes, I certainly will let go. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hold on. And the only nice thing that they said to me was, one of them said, well, thanks for what you did. And that was it. And then they went back and told me off. And pretty soon they stopped talking. And all the diamonds started shrinking, getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and pretty soon it disappeared, and I was back into a dark little room again. Well, that's all it took. And I got on the phone and I called my old job where I had worked, and I hadn't worked in a year. And they said, well, yeah, come on in and fill out an application. I had to have someone jumpstart my car because I hadn't started it in a year. It wouldn't start. And I went to where I used to work, filled out an application, and they hired me. And I started the very next day. So the communication I had with my boys freed me, and it freed them. And I learned a lot about mourning someone. Mourning someone is so unhealthy. It's okay to miss them, but don't mourn them. And I didn't realize at the time, for that whole year, I was like a living headstone to the death of my boys. And because of my experience, and they came back and I was able to see them and they showed themselves to me, I turned that headstone into stepping stones. And that's when I became a hospice nurse. Instead of just being a technical hospital nurse, I took care of people that couldn't speak for themselves, take care of themselves, or going through the dying process. And from then on, it was supportive care. It was an incredible lesson to learn, and turn my life around to support and uplift people that otherwise would have been probably forgotten. There's a big difference between the way an adult dies and the way a child dies. And in my 17 years of hospice, 5 years, I did pediatric hospice, and we had newborns to 17-year-olds. Adults who have experienced life, initially they start mourning the loss of their life. One thing about hospice and having a terminal illness is you have time to process your dying. Generally, people have cancer or some respiratory problems or something, and they die over time. So they have a chance to mourn the loss of a future, to say things to family members, and to correct some mistakes that they made, to ask for forgiveness, to give forgiveness. Adults have all that opportunity, whether they choose to take it or not. They process that. And the closer they get to death, those opportunities are gone. Those windows of opportunity are gone. And they're focused more on the spirits that are coming around them. And I've seen them look probably about 200, maybe 300 times. I saw the outline of beings, and they were huge. They looked like refrigerators, and I called them refrigerator people. I didn't know what they were. But around many of our patients that were actively dying, like within a week of dying, I would see the outline of these huge square-shouldered beings. They were about 6 feet tall, with a round, slightly oval head, no neck. I saw shoulders and a little bit of an arm, but nothing from the chest down. And they were tall, so when I'm standing up, they're about like this to me. And it looked like there was light shining down on them, because I could see the outlines of their heads, the outlines of their shoulders, and of their chests. I didn't see faces. But as the closer that the patient got to death, more of them would show up. And sometimes in a room, there'd be like 40 of them. And it would completely surround, they'd be against the wall and surrounding the patient. And as the patient was getting closer to death, they would start moving closer and closer and closer to the bed. And they were invisible, but I could see the outlines very, very clearly. And it was uncomfortable, because sometimes when I'd have to go take care of the patient, and I would have to walk through them. And, I'm saying, excuse me, but I have to get to the patient. They never responded to me. And, I would do what I had to do and change the patient and clean them up and give them some medication, and then walk through. They completely ignored me. And then they'd get closer and closer, and there'd be dozens of them. And then we'd go in the room, and they had already died, and all of these beings were gone. Just completely gone. And there was like a light in the room when they were there, and when they were gone, it was total darkness. And this happened on some patients, just, I don't know why. And I saw that again and again and again. And then it'd be a week or two later, someone else would have them show up. No idea what that was. Patients would interact with many beings that we wouldn't see, and cats. Many of them would see cats, and we would see like the outline of a cat, just like someone was shining a light down, and you see their back and their tail and the way they move like a cat. We saw cats, or they saw cats all the time. That was weird. Even in the hospital, they would see cats. There's something about a cat spirit or something, the form of a cat, that comforted them. Children haven't had that much of a life to know that they're missing out. Adults miss out. A lot of our adults were, between 20 and 80 years old, and they had wonderful experiences and attachments to wonderful things that they've had throughout their life. Children didn't have that. They're too young. They're living in the now, and they don't realize they're missing out on a future, because the concept of what life's going to be like when they grow up is foreign to them. They never think about that. So children are happy. Other than the pain and nasty tasting medicine, children are happy through the whole thing, and they're interested in, and there's this group that makes wigs for children that had chemo and they lost all their hair. So they plop these horrible wigs on these kids. Well, the kids hate them. The kids don't want to wear a wig. The parents want them to look like a normal kid, so they'll plop these wigs on them. But someone was making silly hats, and the kids love silly hats. So all through the the dying process, they're mourning nothing. They're having fun. They're having fun up to the very end. One thing that the kids saw in unison, and I worked in a 10-bed pediatric hospice inpatient unit, and we had 7 private rooms, and we had one room with 3 beds in it. And there was a wall between each bed, so the kids couldn't see each other. But it was a perfect room for us as a nurse, because one nurse could take care of the 3 sickest kids at once. We could sit there, and I'm at one end of the room, and I could see that kid, this kid, this kid, and take care of them as I needed, change their tubes, their dressings, suction them, give them medication, whatever, and not have to run from room to room. And it was interesting that the kids, it was really neat because of the 3 kids in that room couldn't hear each other, but the ones that were conscious and the ones that were speaking would see the same thing at the same time. And it was almost exclusively, they looked like little spirits. They would describe them to me. I never saw these. They were 4 feet tall, very, very thin heads, very thin bodies, great big eyes, long hands, long fingers. And they would look exactly like if somebody talked about an alien gray and a UFO, you've probably heard of gray aliens. It would be like that, except their heads were skinny. I don't know if they were aliens. I don't know what they were. I just figured they were skinny spirits that kids saw. Hundreds of children over the 5 years that I worked there described the same thing over and over and over again. And the kids that we had in the private rooms, so there's no way they could hear what the other children were saying, would see them also. And almost every one of the children absolutely adored him, laughed. Whatever they were doing is like silly little things. They oh, look what they're doing now. But when I'm in that room where there's the 3 children, they would see them, these beings, do the same thing at the same time. And these spirits, these children spirits, whatever they were, would speak to the kids. And sometimes the kids would repeat what the beings were saying. And the kids would be saying the same thing back to them. And it would sound like to, ba, ti, a, ba, ga, ba, like that. That's not a quote, but that's what it would sound like. And this happened again and again and again. Some of the children were absolutely terrified of him, but I would say like 95% loved him. But the kids that were scared of him, I don't know if it's because the beings were something to be scared of, because a lot of the kids were scared of me, because I was the nurse with the nasty tasting medicine. And you know, for a child, something that tastes bad, it's like, you know, it's like you hit them with a hammer. So were they afraid of them because they were actually scary, or were they just afraid and you know, projected that fear onto those beings? I don't know. And I would sit there and I would ask them mentally, I says, please let me see you, let me see you. And I never did, never got to see them. But they would come sometimes on either side of me and do something, because the kids would laugh. Look what he's doing to him, look what he's doing, and laugh. It was like amazing. And not all of our children were medicated. Some of the kids in the disease process didn't require a lot of narcotics, so this was not a hallucination. 5 years, and this went on and on and on. Somewhere I've got some sketches, because the kids would draw them, and you know, what were they? I have no idea. But almost every one of the children cherished seeing whoever it was. I'm just assuming it's wonderful, you know, angels that look a little goofy, and they just come for children. Thousands of adults I've taken care of, and many have told me what they saw. No adult saw those. That was just exclusively children that saw those beings. So you can change your attitude at any moment, and you can change where you place your attention. You can place your attention on the problems of the world, or you can place your attention on today, I'm going to step up a little closer to spirit because I know spirit loves me. I know the universe loves me. I know God loves me. I know people from my past love me, and I want to be a little bit closer to them.